Are we live? It looks like we're live. Well done. Okay, so we're just going to wait a minute or two to see if there's anyone who's going to be joining our stream. This is our first stream, actually, so there might be a couple of things that's going on that is not planned, so we will make deal with them as they come along. So as I said, this is our first stream, and hopefully we can have some fun tonight. Let's have a look. I think we can make a start. We'll see if there's anyone else joining us tonight. Okay, so in tonight's video, what we're going to do is we are going to create some dashboard controls. We are going to use WPF as the UI language, and we are going to create the back end with Visual Basic. So if you haven't already done so, when you do work on these projects, I've already installed Visual Studio Blend 2017. I don't know if you can see that as my camera in the way. Let's have a look. Okay, so what you need to look for is we're going to create a new project, and we're going to just start our control from the beginning. Now, what I would suggest is if you're creating these controls, give it a good name, because Visual Studio has gone through a couple of major updates, and even though it's backwards compatible, some of the WPF key work behind the frames has changed pretty drastically. I remember designing these controls when I was starting developing in WPF, and they would not work on any of the new coding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this dial gauge 2017, so I know which version it is. I'm also going to put this in a place where I can save it. YouTube video projects, select that. That's the dial gauge. I'm going to leave my framework on 4.5. Okay, so once it loads, if you click on these little arrows on the right hand side and you go to shapes, if you only have 2 of the shapes available, then your community edition did not install the full package. So what you would need to do is you would need to, I'll attach a link at the end of the video, but you would need to check the checkbox when you do the reinstallation. Check the checkbox to install the SKD tools, and that'll give you a complete set of all of these tools. Alright, so that's only the community edition, and that's only when you install it for the first time. If you did install it and you can reopen your installer, you should be able to just check it and it'll install the additional controls. Okay, so for our project, what I want to do is I just want to quickly go and rename everything. So what we did is we created a user control, and this user control I'm going to rename right over here, dial gauge 2017, and it'll also update that. Let's update the name, the class name. Let's also update the reference to the class. Dial gauge 2017. Okay, so now that we've renamed all of our user control namespaces, let's look at our interface. Okay, so this is the user interface, or the UI language, and as you can see we are coding in XAML. So XAML is the front end. It's similar to HTML as a front end for a ASP.NET web page, for example. So what you can do is create controls, put them into different logical order, and then setting their properties. For example, this is a grid. The grid, as you can see, is the highlighted blue area on the screen. And for our control, this is a bit big, and I'm just going to change the design height to 400 and the width to 400. That'll give us a nice square. And I'm also going to set my grid view into a view box, and I'll show you why I do that. Okay, so if I had a shape, for example, let me go onto this grid, give it a bit of a background color so we can see it. That grid is going to be 400 by 400 width. Now we can see we've got our grid there. It's nice. It is nice and white at the back. And I am going to put in a shape. Let's go for an ellipse. I'm going to hold my shift key, make it nice and round, and I'm just going to move it anywhere in that area. Okay, if I take the view box out, you can still see the entire control, but if I click on the grid, which is now the main area where all my controls are stored in, so there's my ellipse, it's under my grid. If I try and change the shape of it, you can see that it will cut the circle. It will actually, it won't form a pretty nice shape in there because it doesn't actually know what to do. But if I stick it back into a view box, get my view box back in there, and now if I move it around, you can see that the entire control will scale. It'll make the entire control bigger and smaller. And the reason we want this is because when we create a control and you want to use that control on your dashboard, you want to make the control fit in a specific size, then you don't want to battle with getting it the right shape and the right size. You want to make sure it's always going to be displayed correctly. So that's what we do. We use a view box for that one. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this circle. I'm going to make it 400 by 400. I'm going to take the margin away. I'm going to make a 0, 0, and then I'm going to center that circle in the middle. Okay, let me also, actually, you know what, let me make it a bit smaller. 380 by 380. Okay, I'm going to make the stroke thickness nice and thick just so we can see it. I think 10 is a good number. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the grid and just remove the back color there. Now we can see we have almost like a face of a watch. Let's go make that back color something interesting. I'm going to go to my gradient color brush. I'm going to look at my black and my white. I'm going to swap them around. And I am going to make a radial gradient. And on my white color, I'm going to change that to a kind of a dark gray. Let's go for 363638. And then I'm going to pull this all the way to about here. And then I'm going to pull this a little bit closer. Okay, so what that's done is actually it's given my rim, the actual stroke of the circle, it's given it a bit of a shadow. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the stroke. I'm also going to change that into a gradient. I'm going to swap them around because I want the white to be on the top. I'm going to change the white also not to that bright white, but about just an off color. And then I'm going to pull this towards the white. And now it looks like we have a little bit of a light effect on the top. You can see that the shadow that we've created is on the inside, and we have a nice background for our dial. Okay, so not a lot of coding there, just a little bit of a design interface there. Okay, let us start working with our dial's features. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to grab an arc. I am going to just click on there, hold my shift, and drag an arc down any kind of shape or any size for now on. And I want to change this line, so the stroke thickness down to about 1. I'm also going to remove the margin to 0, 0, and put it in the center. Now here's where the interesting part comes in. That arc starts at the top and it comes all the way down to this corner. Now it starts at, in this case, it'll be from 0 to 90 degrees. Let's have a look. From 0 start angle to 90 degrees. But because this is going to be a dashboard dial, I want to take it all the way past 90 degrees, all the way down here. And I want to move it all the way around until it comes to the other side down here. Now I've already worked that out. That's a negative 130 degrees and a positive of 130 degrees. I am going to make this stroke white. No, I don't want it a radial. I just want it a solid white. Thank you. Okay, so you can see where it's going to start. It's going to start over here. It's going to come all the way around, and it's going to end there. But it's still a little bit too close to the to our border there. So let's go and make this quite small. I'm going to make this 310. Let's see how that looks. And 310. It's still a bit close. Make it a bit smaller, maybe about 3 or 290. That doesn't look too bad. We might make it smaller just now, depending on what we can fit in there. Okay, so I'm selecting my arc, and we're going to convert this arc into a list box. A list box that follows the arc. To do that, we're going to right click on the arc, path, make layout path. And the moment I click on that, you see it says it's made a path list box. This list box actually follows the path of our arc that we've selected. I'm going to take my arc and I'm going to put it on top of the list box. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is because I would like the arc to show all of the controls. The path will keep the controls, the arc will show them for us. So I'm going to click on the path. I'm going to go down here to right click on there, and I'm going to put in a label. Double click on the label, and now the label is inside the path. If we look at our path here, you can see that we have a label on the inside of that path. You can also see that the label is now on the top of this path. I'm going to the arc, and I'm going to take that stroke and take it away. Now you can see there's a label, and if I go to this label, I'm going to change the word label to the pipe symbol. So shift and the pipe symbol. Oops, no enter. Okay, and that is going to be one of our indicators. This is actually going to be the 0% value. So what we need to do is we're probably going to need about 21 of these. So let's go ahead and copy, paste it. That's 2. Copy 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Copy the 10. That's now 20. 21. Okay. 21. Okay, now I am just going to play around with this path list box. Okay, so as you can see, all of our indicators, they're all over the show. They do follow the path of our arc, but they are all pointing straight up. What we can do is you go to the list box, you can go down to the arc property, and you can go from padded to even spaced, and now they're evenly spaced. And if you click the orientation to follow the path, you can now see that all of them are turning inside into the center point. And now we have all of these individual points of action. Okay, I'm going to go back to my list path and I'm going to look at these labels. Okay, so I think we're going to make them all white, but some of them are going to be bigger than others because we want the 0%, the 10%, the 20%. I want those to be bright, I want those to be big, I want to be able to see them very easily. It's the 5%, so 0, 5%, to be a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller and not as aggressive as our main ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the 0 value. Let us go and make that foreground a nice bright white, and it's going to be bold. I'm going to just copy that and paste it in every second one. Okay, now I'm going to do the same for the rest, but I'm going to take the bold out. So Control V, just take the bold property out, and then we'll copy that and stick them in the ones in between. Oops. Okay, so they do look very bold still. Maybe we should make them silver. That looks a bit better. Let's go make them silver. Great. Okay, so now that we have our little indicators all over the show, let's go do exactly the same thing, but this time we're going to add a bunch of, let me just check if there's any, we're just going to add all of the percentage values. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create another arc. Click on the arc, hold shift, drag it. We're going to make this, let's say 300 by 300. It needs to be slightly bigger than the indicating 300. It needs to be slightly bigger than our indentation lines, our marker points. So I'm going to change that to 0, change that to 0, and center the control. And as you can see, it is touching on the outside, but I would like it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make it about 310 by 310. Not too bad. Actually, let's see if we can make this maybe a bit more. Instead of 290, I'm going to go 270. 270. And make that arc 270 by 270. And that means that this guy would be nicely spaced. Okay, for this arc, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start our angle at -130, and I am going to end the angle at 130. Okay, and then the same method I'm going to use. Right click on it, path, make layout path, click on the arc itself, move it above the path box, click on the path box, and double click to add a label. There we go. Now we have a label, and this guy, his name is going to be 0% %. I'm going to take him 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%. Let's rename them. That's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100%. Okay, now as you can see, they don't actually line up at the moment, but it's because we still need to go to the path list box, go down to the properties and space them evenly. And now you can see they line up with our main indicators, the bold ones. We're also going to turn them towards the path, so we have a nice value across there. And what I'm going to do as well is I am going to make the font white, and what shall we make them bold? Nah, just leave them as is. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's do something easy. We're going to do box selecting. I'm going to select my value there, Alt Shift, move them all up, Control V. There we go, and Control V. Excuse me. Okay, so now we have our main indicators, our main indicator points, our halfway marks, and they all line up pretty nicely. Okay, now we're going to add 3 indicators to say what kind of a state we are in. So normally with a gauge you would have a performance level which is green, you would have some sort of warning level, and you would have some sort of a failure level. If you think about your rev counter in your car, for example, it'll have a red area where you shouldn't be revving into. So I'm going to add the same thing into this one. Again, we're going to use an arc. I'm going to hold my shift down, drag an arc, and I'm going to have it about the same size as our indicators. So I'm going to do about 270, I think it was, by 270, and remove our margins. I am going to put it in the middle, and we are going to start at -130, and we are going to end it at, let's say, 130 as well. This guy, we are going to change the stroke thickness to about 10, and this can give the stroke a full color of some nice green or something. Okay. Okay, now we have this green bar going all around, but it is obscuring all of our points, and it might be a bit too big. So let's go and edit that. Let's go and edit that. I think what we can do is put this arc behind all of the controls. That's start number 1. We'll put it behind all of the controls. The second thing we can do is maybe not make it as thick. Let's go and make it about, what is that? Let's go to 5. 5 is a nice value. I think that's a good value. Okay, but we have started at -130, and we've gone all the way around to a +130. But how are we going to get it to go from 0 to, let's say, 70%? Well, in that case, we have to do a little bit of math exercise. So let me go to Notepad, and we do the following. Okay, so to get every 0 to 10, so every 10% on our gauge, we have to do a calculation. So we started at -130, and we ended at 130. Okay, so in total there's 260 degrees between the start and the end of our control. That means that every divided by 10 will give you 26 degrees from 0 to 10. Okay, so if every 26 degrees is 0 to 10, we need to calculate it. if we start at negative 30 and we wanted to go to 70, so it's 26 times 7 for the 70 to get to the 70, and that is 26 times our 7 equals 182. Now we need to subtract the 130 degrees, because from the 50 value all the way back is a negative value. So I'm going to minus 130, and that gives me 52. Okay, so that means our arc would have to end at 52. And there we go. Now we started at 0 and we've gone to 52. Maybe we should go up to 80. I'm just thinking that that'll be a nicer number. So let's go 26 times 8. So cancel the 26 times 8 minus the 130, and that is 78. Okay, we go there and end at 78. Brilliant. Okay, so that would be our performance arc. Let's create another one. Hold my shift, give it a drag. That was 270 by 270, no margin, middle, and the start angle was what is it, 76 till 90? It might not be. It was 78. 78. And we'll calculate the end angle in a minute, but let us give it a warning color. So something about orange, orangey. No, not the full, but the, actually that's a nice color. Let me grab that color, copy that, go to the stroke and paste this in there, and now we can see we've got a bit of an orange one there. So I'm just going to add plus the 26 to that. We'll end at 104. So that would be 104, and that'll go from 80 to 90. Okay, and as you can imagine, we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to add an arc, hold my shift button, give it a draw, change it to our size of 270. We are taking the margin away, take this margin away, center these two, and our last end value was 104 plus 26, 130, that's right. So start angle 104 and end at 130. Okay, and now we would need to give it a bit of a fail value, fail color. That should be fine, that reads quite nice. Okay, so we have our green indicator, our orange indicator, and our red indicator, our performance, our warning, and our error. Okay, we have our values, we have all of our indicating points or percentage values. Now let us start playing with the real stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of the shapes. The shapes I'm going to pick is a block arrow up. And be sure to pick the block arrow up for the reason that the starting point for the block arrow up is, as you can imagine, the top. So it'll start at 50%. If you had to go for the block arrow right, it would start here. It will start in the middle at a 90-degree angle. And what that would cause is it will only be able to turn 180 degrees, which means it'll stop at 15% and it won't go any further than that. So for us to be able to make sure it goes from 50 all the way down and from 50 all the way up, we have to look at the up arrow. So I'm going to select an up arrow, and I'm going to go outside and just draw a shape. So let us just go and change a little bit of the properties. The fill for that, let's make it some sort of a light blue color because it's not used anywhere on that graph or on that dial. I'm going to take that blue. I'm also going to change the stroke to that blue. Okay, I'm going to take the control. I'm just going to move it into the rough center for now so we can see what it looks like. Okay, that looks absolutely horrible. I'm going to change the stroke thickness to nothing. And that's going to be a solid color. Let's make that a solid color. There we go. So that's quite sharp. That's quite sharp. Let's see if we can zoom in and maybe 150% onto that one. So that's quite sharp. It's got a little arrow on the top. I don't like that arrow. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to the arrow angle. So I'm going to bring that down. And you can see now it creates a little triangle. What's the width on this? It's about 10. So I'm going to make it exactly 12. And that height is 117. I'm going to make that 120. Just to give us nice round numbers. Okay. Now, how do we get this arrow in the center? Well, it's actually quite simple. I'm going to make my margins all 0. I am going to center it in the center of my entire project. I'm going to zoom to 100 just so you can see the overall effect. Okay, so there it is there. And what I need to do now is go and give it a margin of the same height, 120. 120, oops, wrong one, not from the top. The top one needs to be 0, it's from the bottom, 120. Bam. Now, the bottom of this control is now exactly in the center of our entire control. And to prove that, what we need to do is we go to transform. And this is a method you can pick where the center point is. At the moment, if I look at my center point here, you can see there's a white dot over there. That's the center point. And what I want to do is I want to bring that center point all the way down into the middle, roughly there where that square is there. So what I need to do is in this, you can see there's these 6 blocks are represented over here, and I want to move the center point from the center down here into that block there. And the moment I click it, look at it jump, bam, there we go. So that is now our center point. I'm now going to zoom back to 100 just to get an overall see where it is. And there you go. Now let's go and do a quick test. Let's go back to the transform. I'm going to click on my rotate. I am going to click on this angle. You can see my cursor is actually like little arrows that which appear. So I'm going to click that and can drag it, and you can see how the control is going to move all the way up to 130 degrees and all the way down to a negative 130 degrees about. So about there. So that is how the gauge is going to move up and down. Let's make that back to 0, and you can see that the 0 degree is actually right on the top, and that's why we've picked the up arrow to use rather than any of the right or the left arrows. Okay, so when we run this control for the first time, we wanted it to show us that it is actually loaded and initialized. And what we're going to do is we're going to just add a simple storyboard. I'm going to click here on next to my storyboard, click and add a storyboard. I'm going to call this initial animation. Okay, and I'm going to take it out of recording. I'm going to start the rotation angle at negative 130. Okay, I'm going to click record, and over here I'm going to move my I'm going to add a keyframe. I'm going to move that for about 2 seconds, and because my recording is on, if I change the value to 130, I can now go all the way back, and you can see it's now drawn a keyframe, a double animation keyframe animation in here. And let's stop the recording and give it a play. Okay, so it takes 2 seconds to go from 0 to 100%, and now I'm going to take another recording from there. I'm going to drag it to 1 more second, so 3 seconds, and here I'm going to change from 130 to negative 130. Switch off my recording all the way to the back, and let's see what it does. 2 seconds to go there and 1 second to come back. So that is the initial animation when the control is going to be loaded up, and we can even see that if you look at the code that was generated for this animation, you can see that it starts at 0 to 130. Starts at 0. Keyframe 0 is negative 130. It takes 2 seconds to go to 130, and then 1 more second to go to negative 130. And here you can see the framework element loaded. It begins the storyboard when the framework is loaded. Okay, so what that just means is that every time this control gets loaded onto a form, maybe onto a dashboard, or anywhere you want to use it, this control is just going to show you, bam, I'm ready. It's going to counter up, it's going to counter down. Okay, I am not actually very happy about this color. Let's go and change the color of that arrow. Maybe maybe something a little bit lighter. Maybe something there. Okay. Do it there. What is that? That looks a bit better. Yeah, the blue was just a bit distracting. Okay. Now, the arrow is on our 0. It's going to load everything up. What I do want to do is I want to give it a bit of a cover. Let's go to shapes. I'm going to take an ellipse. I'm going to draw with my shift button down. I'm drawing a little bit of a circle there. The fill I am going to make a little bit darker, and the stroke maybe the same color. The stroke I am going to actually leave the stroke the same and just make it a bit thicker. Stroke thickness maybe about 3, and then I'm going to take that guy and take the margins away again. 0, 0, put you in the center, and now it looks like a dial. There we go. Go all the way back, give it a run. Man, that looks awesome. Okay, so we've now actually done majority of the design. I would like to add 2 more labels. Label 1, I'm just gonna just drag one here, I suppose. Draw one here. No, wrong control. Wrong control selected. Don't do that at home, kids. So I'm going to click the grid, click my control, and just give it a label. Okay, so this label, the content is going to be, for now, performance. Okay, let us move it to the center, no margins as well. And I want to give it a nice size, maybe about 20. Yes, that looks good. A foreground color of something that's maybe white, and then I want to make sure it's in the center. So we're going to go down to, where is it? Horizontal content alignment center. There we go. And I'm going to pull this guy down to about there. Make sure it's center. 0, 0, center. Okay, so there we go. We have our performance, or the name of the control. That could be water pressure. That could be anything, whatever this gauge is going to show. I'm also going to take another copy of this guy, copy it, paste it in there, and just bring it down a little bit. It does not need to be that big. I'm going to maybe make it 100. And at this point, I'm going to go and look at the content and change it to 0% %. Okay, So we have a indicator of where we're supposed to be. We have a name for the control, and it's set up in a nice way that it could start up. Okay, so let's go and do a couple of namings. This label here, excuse me, I've already pre-named all of them. So that guy, we're going to call him label value. This guy we are going to call label name. This is our, why is this one? Oh yeah, of course. Let's go to the full, let's make the full nothing. There we go, so we know it's orange. This is our error arc. So copy that name, error arc, there we go. Then we have this guy here, make that full nothing, and we are going to call this guy our warning arc. And where is this guy here is our performance arc. Okay, so what I want to do is I just want to move the error arc and the warning arc right underneath our performance arc. So let's just make that a little bit wider. That is our error arc, that is our warning arc, and what it should do now is it just allows all the other controls to appear in front of all of our indicators. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. Let us go and look at the code behind. Okay, let's start with the error arc values. Okay, I've already written some of the stuff, and here we go. We have a sub. Okay, we have a sub called set value point. So this value point that we want to do is we want to send a value. So when you have a dashboard and you want to say my value is 20%, my value is 45%, then that's the value you want to send. You don't want to send many complicated methods and things like that. So this set value point is going to be our sub. It's a public sub, which means it should be readable with outside of this control when you load the control into your project. Let us just add our reference to the animation class. There we go. Okay, we also didn't name the pointer because that's the guy that's going to be running around anyway. I think I need to call it arrow. Cover you, yes. Instead of block arrow, it's just arrow pointer. Then it should match up with my code. There we go. Okay, so what are we doing? Okay, we know that our math point. So even though we calculated that 26 is from 0 to 10%, every step in between is actually a 2.6% or 2.6 degrees. That's why 26 would have been 10%, obviously. So our math point would take whatever value we pass into it. If we said we wanted a value of 30%, it'll be 30 multiplied by the 2.1 degrees, and it will then move to that point. Now the good thing is that we are using something which is called double animation keyframes. That means that the double animation keyframes would start calculating from the point where the arrow is to the point where the next value should be. That means it only needs to calculate and create the keyframes between the start and the end, which means that we don't need to pass the start value to the animation. All we need to tell it is where to move to. It'll automatically calculate from where it is to where it needs to go. So in this case, we are doing a calculate the math point in the percentage, and then we minus that 130 degrees from the math point where we need to be. We then create a storyboard. we add a double animation keyframe to the storyboard. We then have two setter properties. The one is we allocate this setter property to our double animation, and the same with the target setter property to the double animation. And the property that we are changing is the rotate angle. Now, if you don't know which property to take, or which property path you would want to change, all you can do is go back to the animation, and you can just copy this property that it's changing, copy that guy and stick it in here, and it will use the exact same method. And that's one of the reasons why I created the little initial animation, so that it can generate the properties that we are going to change. Okay, so in this keyframe, we want the animation to always take 1 second. If you you can add some motion and some animation to that, and I'll show you in a second, but in this case 1 second to move from one value to another value is quite quick, because your dashboard is not going to update every second. Your dashboard's probably going to update in some cases only once a minute, once 5 minutes, once 10 minutes, but not every second, otherwise it's going to use too much processing power. In this case, we're going to do it in 1 second to update the animation and do the animation. It's going to move the frame value from the start position to the end position. Actually, we then add our frames to our double animation keyframe. We add the animation to it, and then we also change the label values. So the value, that little percentage guy over there, we update with the percentage that was sent in, and then we begin the storyboard. Okay, so before we run this code, let me just show you what you can do with the animation in here. For example, if I click on the arrow, you can see this is all of our animation sections here. I can click on that line, oh sorry, the keyframe, I think. Go on the keyframe, and what you can see is easing function. At the moment it says none. Okay, actually let's just go all the way to the start, because I wanted to go on that one. And if I select the drop down box from here, you can have something like this. For example, it's let's go for this one just as a show. It'll start slow, move very quickly, and then end slow. So let's have a look what that looks like. Not much, did it? No. Let us do a bounce and see if that. No, am I selecting the wrong one? I probably am. The render transform, elastic out. Go all the way back. It's not doing anything at the moment for me. I think I'm selecting the wrong values. Is that maybe the render? Let's give it a bounce. That's it. Okay, yeah, so I've selected the wrong value. So there you can see we can do a bounce, we can do a circle shape, which is actually quite nice. It starts slow, moves quick, and then stops slowly. Or you can do any of the other values you want. That's going way past our values. But as you can see, you can select any of the easy functions in there. I'm going to go with none, because I just want to move it professionally from one point to another point. So I'm just going to make that none. Okay. Now, we've coded it. We have designed most of it. Now let's test it. Okay, I'm going to go to Visual Studio. Okay, so yes, recover all of those files, please, because we've just spent so much time developing it. Come on. I'm not redoing this project tonight, Microsoft. I'm not doing it tonight, Microsoft. La 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 la. Finally. Okay. Let us just make sure everything is still working the way we expected. I'm going to select my animation storyboard. I am not going to record anything on that. I'm going to give it a play. And yes, that is not what we expected. We need to take this guy to none. And it's still doing that. It was one of these keyframes that needs to be none, 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 all the way back. You needs to be none, none, none. Good. All right. Well, now get back on track. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to build, and I'm going to rebuild this entire project. Now, we basically haven't actually tested this yet. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the project's location, which is in my data, personal, YouTube, video project, and there's the dial gauge, object, debug, and I see its DLL is there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Visual Studio, create a new project. Visual Basic, because this is the Visual Basic version. Windows Classic, WPF. I am going to call this. What's it going to be? Gauge test for 2017 items. I am going to go and put this in the same project. Data, personal, YouTube videos, and save it there, click OK. Okay, so we've created the control. It is a user control, which means that we can actually reuse it wherever we want. So the only way we can use it would be to stick it into our control box or our toolbox. And I'm going to just make sure that our common controls are in there. I'm going to right click, choose items, are you also going to take your time? There we go. And then I'm going to click on Browse. Now I'm under the WPF components. Click on Browse, and under our project, the dial gauge, object, debug. There's the DLL. I'm going to open that. Click OK. And now you can see we have a dial gauge, 2017 gauge, right here. I'm going to take it, drag it onto there, and as you can see, it does that initial display that we expected it to do. Okay, I'm going to add a button, and let's just double click on this button, and on the code behind, nice and big, let us play with that gauge. Okay, let's go and click on the gauge, we give it a name, dull gauge 1. How about that? That should be perfect. Okay, so the dull gauge 1, we have a set set the current value property, and let's just give it a quick value there. It's not gonna, is that even the right set value point? There we go, the wrong one, that's why. Set a value point, it's very late at night, and that is why. Set a value point. Okay, and I'm just going to make it 20. That's why it didn't work, because I'm very, very sleepy at the moment. Click on start. Application is in break mode. Okay, so this sometimes happens. Let us go and save the project, rebuild it. Expression controls public token as one of the dependencies cannot be specified. Is it really? You can't specify it? Well, maybe I should add a reference to the same browse. Add a, if you go to the bin and the debug, you will find that there's a drawing in the controls DLL as well. Let's see if we import that. It says it's already in there. Okay. Well then, why don't you want to work then? Oh, now it decides to work. Can you believe it? Okay, let's see if it goes to 20. Bam! There we go. Alright. Now for something to play with. Let's go and do a public R as random, and I'm going to put R dot get the next random value between 0 and 100%. Okay, so every time I click that button, it should give us a random value and therefore a random number. Okay, here we go. Whoop, no, here we don't go. Then R as new random. That probably would explain it. $77. Now, let's go and zoom in on this control so I can show you a little bit better. Let's just make that nice and big. This grid and the window. Okay, and make you much bigger. And move the button now. Okay, let's just start with that. Okay, so now it's nice and big, and as you can see, our view box has actually done a fantastic job keeping everything lined up. The center points are still in the center points, and all of the values are there. If I click on the button, it goes to 58, and you can see that's 55. There's 58 right there. Click it again, and you can see it moves from the last point to the next point. Click it again. That's 98 or 89. 14, 94. There you go. Okay, so you can see that the control works. It goes up and down and moves where it needs to be. But like I said, in the off term, I am going to just update the video a little bit because I don't want all of that installation packages shown, and I'm also going to update some of the control values where you can go and put some of the stuff in the front or at the back. What I am going to do in this video very quickly is change our ellipse. You see the fill. I'm going to change the fill to an image. Let's go and see what is a nice image. Have I got any pictures? Let's see that one. Let's go and create a new, add a new folder. Images, stick in that picture, select that, and image source, cancel that. Let's just select it from there, it should be easier. Pictures, Okay, so that is a very bright background. So what I am going to do is bring that opacity right down. Okay, now I'm going to, and the reason I'm showing you this is because if you make an update to the control, what you do is go to build, rebuild that control, and if you look at your project, bam, it'll update it. But now because I did the opacity, the white background shining through, so if I had, let's say, a dark background on this, let's go and give it a dark background, a bit of a darker one, or whatever, then it'll actually mesh quite nicely into it. I mean, even if you had another image as a background, let's see if we can add a new folder and images, and I am going to, oh come on, I'm going to copy this alien, paste it in there, then select the form, the background is going to be an image, alien background, so basically you can see that if you have the opacity set to then your background actually shines through your control, which is, you know, kind of nice, just as a quick tip. However, your control, if you want to update your control, all you need to do again is go and change whatever property it is. So that ellipse, the background for that, I'm going to make it a gradient again. Swap those two around again, and I'm going to make it maybe a red inside. Bring that this way, bring it up there. I'm going to add another guy in there, make it there. That looks absolutely horrible. But you get the idea. If you want to make a change to it, you make your change, click on build, click on rebuild, and go to your project. If a project is running, you have to stop it. But there you go. Okay, so if there's any questions that you have on this topic, then absolutely you can post them in the comments. You don't need to be on Patreon to be able to write the code yourself. However, there's going to be some changes that I'm making to this control. So if you want the final control, it will be on Patreon, and you will need to pay $1 to get it. If not, you can write all the code yourself. Everything will be on here, except for one or two things, which is very easy to figure out. All you will need to do is make a couple of properties, set the start and the end values for each of the arcs. Okay. If there's anything related to this project, then please send me a question, email me a question. That should be fine. And I will see you then later. Don't forget to subscribe, ring that bell, and have a good evening. Cheers.